Welcome to JHart Modelworks. In this video, we will be building some side skirts and a front diffuser for the 1990s version Honda NSX by Tamiya. Welcome to my workbench. Let's get started. Before we begin, let's just go through our tools and materials. We're going to use our hobby knife, some form of a marking instrument. I use fine tip permanent marker, a ruler. I like these thin metal rulers because you can use them as a hard cutting edge as well as measuring. Sanding implements, files, sanders, whatnot. Glue. I'm going to use Tamiya extra thin. You could use super glue. It's going to leave more of a seam, and when it comes time to gluing it to the body, things could get kind of messy. So this is going to form a much stronger bond, which will make the part a little bit more rigid and more stable. This is some sprue goo. This is just the leftover bottom of some Tamiya extra thin, and then you just take and chop up small bits of your extra leftover sprue. I tend to use either Hasegawa or Tamiya plastic when I can, as that's kind of the better plastics out there. And you just chop it up into small bits, you throw it in the bottom, and you just let those bits of plastic melt. This makes a great filler, as when you put it down, it'll go into where it needs to go, like a liquid, and then as it cures out, it will solidify, and the bond is basically pure plastic. We're going to use some tape, and we'll be using some sheet styrene. This is just some 0.02 inch thick sheet styrene. I grabbed like 4 sheets in 2018 from Amazon. They're like 1 foot by 2 foot sheets, and I still have like a sheet and a half left. It's great for scratch building, especially flat things like the side skirts and the front splitter that we're going to be doing today. Alright, so I've already started prepping the body. As you can see, I've gone in and rescribed all the panel lines and just filled them with some Tamiya panel line accent color. I do that because it helps me find where I get out of the lines. Sometimes I get out of the panel lines and I have to clean them up. An example of that, a really bad example of that, was over here where I had to fill that. But I went ahead and got the panel line scribed out because once we go putting the side skirts in place, at the very least this panel line is going to be real hard to get at. This panel line might be kind of hard to get at. So just go ahead and knock that out first. I've also keyed the body with just a little bit of 600 grit Tamiya sanding sponge just to get it all nice and roughed up and ready for paint. So to start, we're going to go ahead and take some measurements here. The length of the skirts is going to be about 75 millimeters. This is just kind of some eyeballs. We'll make corrections later. About 5 mils wide. Well, the way I do this is I make multiple dots, 5 mils off the edge. That way when I line my ruler up to do the cut, that's going to give me a straight line that will be parallel to the outside edge line. Give that a good scoring, and it just comes clean. Going to be the start of the bottom of our side skirts. So I'm going to have these side skirts going right up to, there's a lip right here. Under where that panel line sits, there's a lip. You can see it here as well. So I'm going to have it running right up in there. Alright, so to put some tape down, And we're going to use this to form some templating. I want to define the edge of the body. And because I want these to be straight and the body curves, if you really press this down into the grooves, it'll stretch the tape out a little bit and you'll end up with longer pieces than what you need. So I try to keep it as flat as possible. I'm however going to take my thumbnail and just rub it into the area where I want. Basically, there's a panel line in here. Looking on this side, you can see that there's a gap in here, and that's where I want that the skirt to sit, is right up inside that dip. Just use my thumb to kind of score this in a little bit. And from a design perspective, we don't want to have it going into the door jamb area or into that. We don't want it to cover up the panel line for the door on the area that's underneath it. So if you see it kind of curves in there a little bit, so we want to make sure we don't get into that. And aesthetically for this back, kind of want to follow this intake line. We're going to do just a little bit of aesthetics here. Maybe bring this up a little bit more. Another quick remeasure, just kind of make sure we stayed around the right length, which we are. Get something like this. We're just going to go in and kind of clean up the lines a little bit. The design should look something about like that. And next we're going to cut this front piece. Kind of make these the same length. We're going to use our other part as a guide. So a dry fit shows that 5 mils is just too wide. I'm going to go ahead and cut 1 mil off and check it again. So just a quick dry fit. And that looks about good. And one thing we do want to do is I don't want this side skirt to stick all the way out like this. So I'm going to basically just narrow this in a little bit. Use the body as a guide here. We're just going to bring that in a bit like that so that it won't stick out as much. There'll be a little more shape to it. And now we're going to use these 3 parts to make parts for the other side. Alright. Now we're going to glue the parts together. I like to use something square, something somewhat square, like an Altoids box. This is going to help me line up the parts. And from here, I can go and hit them with a little bit of Tamiya Extra Thin. And because the Altoid box is metal, the glue won't glue the Altoid box to the parts because I'm using cement, but it will hold them straight. We're just going to let that sit for 10-15 minutes, let that tack up. I'm going to round the tops off on these parts, as I want that top edge to kind of have a curve. I already glued the other parts on, so I will do them after. I'm just cleaning it up and making it look a little nicer. Instead of having a sharp edge up at the top where it's going to meet, it'll just have a nice rounded beveled edge. And once the seams are glued, we'll round off the bottoms as well. That'll make it look more like an actual part. So once the parts have set up a bit, I'm going to go ahead and very gently pull these off the box, and I will then run a bead of Tamiya Extra Thin down the inside of the parts. Alright, so we've let the parts sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. Just really enough so that they would tack up and they would hold together, but they were still kind of flimsy so they can bend and twist as they need to. And we've gone ahead and just used some tape, and we've taped them in place. We have not glued these to the body at all, but being taped in place like this, if you see there's a slight inward bend from where the parts will bend in to lean against the body, and this will just allow the parts to finish curing at the right angle. So that when it's done curing, it'll be a nice solid join in the right shape. I won't be pushing on anything. I won't have to risk breaking any parts, because these tops, these little flanges at the tops of these are real delicate. I've also gone ahead and I've just rounded off, just beveled the tops of these parts. Once everything is cured and in place, probably I'll give this at least a couple hours to set up. And what we'll do is we'll just go in and we'll put some of that sprue glue on the inside of the join, just to fill it a little bit, make it a little bit more structurally solid. So we'll be back when we get to that point. Alright, we are back. This has been sitting for quite a bit. Next thing we're going to do before we glue these onto the body, we're going to take some of our sprue glue. And what this is, like I said in the materials, this is basically, I think this is Hasegawa plastic if I remember correctly. I made this bottle back when I did the Ferrari 328 GTS, back before I even had my channel. If it starts to dry up on you, just pour a little bit more Tamiya Extra Thin back in it, keep it nice and liquidy. You want it to kind of have that kind of thick glue-like consistency. But it's just some bits of sprue chopped up and dropped into an old bottle of Tamiya Extra Thin. I got down around a quarter of the bottle, maybe a little bit less, and just started chopping it up. And that plastic will melt in the glue, and you basically end up with liquid plastic. This is essentially liquid styrene. But we're just going to put a bit in these joints. And what that's going to do is, as the cement goes down, the cement's going to melt the seam. It's going to melt like the top layer of the plastic, and it's going to deliver the plastic that's melted into to the cement in the bottle. When the cement evaporates out and dries out, it's going to leave that styrene in its place, and you're basically just building plastic in there. It's like having plastic, liquid plastic you can use as a filler, but it's basically just going to strengthen up for what we're using it for. It's just going to strengthen up that join and just put some extra material in there so that it will be less inclined to break over time. So again, we're going to let this sit for a few hours because we really want that to dry up. And once that's done, we're going to glue the parts onto the body and sand this corner a little rounder. Basically, we just want to smooth it off. We don't want to do a whole lot to it. We just want to kind of round it off a little bit and make it look like it's a solid piece, like it's all one piece, and that it's a nice smooth, like a kit part, and less like two pieces of plastic glued together. So we kind of want to, just going to make it look a little cleaner. And that has cured up. And it just, like I said, it just adds a little bit more plastic in there so that those joints are a little more stable. So right now we're going to go ahead and get these glued into place. Since the connection point is really thin, you want to make sure you get a good glue bond. So once you have the bottom glued into place, we're going to very carefully take the Tamiya extra thin and we're going to run it along the top of the part, and then we're just going to very carefully run it into the seam. You'll want to get some glue in between the plastic and the body, but you don't want to get it all over the body, so be very careful at this point. For that bottom, I am gluing right up into that seam as well. I want to make sure that I get a nice, good, solid connection with that. So I'm also going to go ahead and drop a bit of tape on here, just kind of hold that center in place. Make sure the plastic stays pulled up against the body. Now that the glue is fully cured and the skirts are firmly attached to the body, we can take our sanders and we want to just round off the bottom edge a bit and sand away the seam line if we can. And now that we have that sanded, you can see that step gives us a much more finished look and makes our skirts look more like they could be a kit part and less like some chopped up bits of plastic glued together and just slapped on. So that's it for the side skirts. Next we're going to move on to making a front splitter. And this is going to be a much simpler process than the side skirts was. For this front splitter, all we really have to do is just template the bottom of the car and then extend that out a bit. Trace the inside edge and then trace the outside edge. Outside edge is a little trickier. The tension on the tape makes the inside edge easy to trace. The outside flops around a bit on you. So now we just kind of want to see roughly how much further out we want this to go. I'm probably going to give it about 2 millimeters. We could leave this center part in. I'm not going to, because it's going to cover a lot of the detail. Once you have it scored pretty good, you don't even have to cut all the way through it. You just get it scored real good and you can just bend it. It's going to give us something like this. Now this is a fairly rough shape. So just want to clean up that outer edge a bit, especially some of the areas where it wobbles a lot when I was cutting. Just to get a test fit, I'm going to go ahead and use some double-sided 3M sticky tape. Line it up on the back here. So that's going to be the basic for your splitter. Now it does still wobble a bit on this front edge, so I will probably sand this a little bit more and get that smooth instead of kind of, you can see where it kind of dips in the center. So I will probably bring that back on the edges so that it's all nice and straight. And we could go ahead and glue this in place, but my understanding is that the fit on this is very tight for the body. So what I'm actually going to do is end up just painting this separately, and then once the body is put on the chassis and not coming off again, then I'll go ahead and I will just glue straight on these corners and maybe along that front edge and glue it into place. You can do some really creative things. You can get some jagged edges, some very unusual shapes. You can put some wings on it. My AMG GT is the first car that I did a body kit on. You see I kind of have this indents in here. Have little side wings on it. So you can get more creative. I'm going to go ahead and stay kind of simple on this one. I was kind of following this front edge on the white part of the car. So that's going to call that done for the scratch built body kit. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Also feel free to leave comments, feedback, critique, or anything else in the comment section below. I enjoy interacting with all my viewers in the comment section and try to reply to all the comments I receive. If you want to catch future videos, please consider subscribing to my channel and make sure you click the bell notification icon so you can be notified when I upload new videos. As always, thank you for watching, keep modeling, and have a great day.